So, good morning, everybody, and a very warm welcome to this second webinar on food systems and value chains. We've got a very exciting program for you today, and I'm really looking forward to listening to our two speakers. But before we start, I'd just like to acknowledge the support of the Ecom Foundation for the Development of Origin Resources, who had the idea of this webinar series and also gave us some sponsorship for it. So after these few words of welcome, our agenda today, we're very, very fortunate to have Abimami Oladipo, who is currently a business advisor from Ignitia in Nigeria and has a long experience in food systems and value chains. We're going to have a Q&A, and then a live entrepreneur, Martin Tenwa, who's the CEO and co-founder of the Ento Organic Farm in Uganda. And then my colleague John Magonia is going to give the closing remarks. So a fantastic program for us today. Now I'm going to stop sharing and hand over to Ayobami, who's going to talk about the food systems and value chains. So Ayobami, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hello, everyone.
Ayobami is an agricultural professional with more than 10 years experience in addressing climate change in the food system. So she's worked on building farmer resilience and her experience spans back, I said, more than 10 years to the HEDA, the HEDA Resource Centre, which is the Human and Environmental Development Agency. And during that time, she worked with the Nigerian Meteorological Agency and academia to develop climate smart advisories for farming communities and produced a handbook. And we'll give you the link to that handbook, which is a great resource. She studied agronomy in the famous University of Ibadan in Nigeria and followed that by an MSc in organic farming and food production at the University of Newcastle in the UK. So Ayobami has a fantastic experience in this field, and we're really looking forward to her intervention. So I'm going to share my screen now and share screen. There we go. And we can go ahead.
Okay, if you could put that in slideshow, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, I don't know, good evening to some people, depending on where you're from. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, Anne, for inviting me to speak to the brilliant minds in this room today. I know that a lot of the things I'll be saying wouldn't be so new to all of them, but to also just serve as a reminder to everyone, and perhaps we can pick up something new from what we're doing today. Right, so it's an honor to stand before you and address you on this important topic, which is the impact of climate change on food systems and value chains. Just to let everyone know, you can simply call me Ayo. Ayobami is the full name, but you can just call me Ayo. Next slide, please. Okay, so I know that I have just about 22 minutes to speak now, and this is the quick outline of how I'm going to, discuss the topic with you. We'll be defining the key themes, Uganda's food system, what are the challenges brought about by climate change, and how do we mitigate it? How do we adapt to it? And what are the opportunities we can find, in this climate change crisis? Okay. And so to set the
So now it has
okay.
2 links giving access.
Can all
Oh.
participants be on mute, please?
All right, I'll just go on. Okay, so some of the definition of some of the key terms. What is a food system? When a lot of us talk about agriculture, we usually just think about the production, right? But the food system is more than just the production. It is a complex web of activities. So it includes the production, the processing, transportation or distribution, if you like, and the consumption of food. And so we understand that the farmer alone does not get the food to your table. There are other actors that aid the food system. And then what is climate change? Climate change also refers to the long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns. And of course, we know that this might be natural, but in the last several millennia, actually, we've had human activities being the main driver of climate change. And I would say something because we're talking about agriculture here. Agriculture actually accounts for up to about 40% of the greenhouse gas emissions. Of course, we usually argue about what is Africa's contribution to climate change compared to other places whereby they are more intensive systems. So, of course, climate change are the weather variations that that affect agriculture production. Okay, so next slide. And then what is the value chain? Because Anne also put the value chain. So a value chain is, think about it like the food system for a particular crop, all right? So it's defined as all of the people, the activities that bring one basic agricultural product. So for instance, you have the maize value chain, you have the vegetables value chain, you have the cotton value chain. So from production and all through to the last mile user, which is the consumer. So for instance, I'll use ugali. I hope I pronounced it very well. I think it's a popular East African dish, ugali. And so the value chain of ugali will start from the production of the maize, right? And then you have processing, you have people that will then dry it and blend it, or should I say grind it into the corn mill. And then you have the distributors that take it to the markets where it could be via vehicles, or it could be from a very close by farm to the local community market, and then onto your table. And so talking about Uganda's food system, like every other place in sub-Saharan Africa, the Uganda food system is characterized by small-scale production. So when you start with the production, you have the small-scale production. You have the old farmers who mostly use crude tools, to produce their crops. And then you have the processing, which is mostly by cottage businesses who do not have sophisticated tools to be able to process more efficiently. And then you have distribution. Of course, we know what distribution is like in sub-Saharan Africa, starting from the roads to the vehicles used in distributing these foods. Many times the bad roads and the type of vehicle used to distribute could contribute to the losses of this food, thereby contributing to food insecurity. And of course, in the end, when you have poor transportation, poor production, the quality of food that we eat these days, you see that it is greatly depleted. So just like every other country in sub-Saharan Africa, Uganda's food system is also mostly small scale and subsistence. Next slide, please. So, of course, we're talking about how then climate change affects the value chain. So I'm going to quickly share a short story about how the climate change affected the farmer in Nigeria. Of course, I've changed some of those values to Uganda shillings so that you can be able to contextualize it properly. So this is the field of a farmer, Jude Atuke, who is a 74-year-old rice farmer, somebody that should be retired, right? He's still working so hard to put food on the table. And at that age, he took a loan of about 12 million Uganda shillings from the bank, but it wasn't enough, right? He then sold his houses for another 20 million Uganda shillings and invested everything in his rice farm. He was then going to harvest about 700 bags of rice, but due to the floods that happened in 2022, he lost everything. His field was completely submerged, right? And so he could not even harvest one grain, okay? And so, of course, and so the floods also that occurred in 2012 led to the loss of over 600,000 hectares of crops and livestock, with estimated budget damages worth over $4 billion. And so we can see the monetary cost of climate change on farmers. Of course, it even goes beyond the monetary cost. We have the effect on lives and properties of these farmers. I know that it was in 2019, 2021, there were some floods in Uganda that cost a lot of lives. And so the impact of climate change can be really devastating. Next slide, please. So when we talk about the challenges of climate change, one of the first things we think about is how the increasing temperature is decreasing yields, right? So how does the increase in temperature decrease yields? So what happens is that when the weather is very hot, it reduces yields because crops will speed through the developmental process, thereby producing less grains in the process. So you have more of vegetative growth compared to, fruiting, compared to fruiting, right? And so that's why sometimes when you harvest your maize, you find out that the quality of the cob is very poor. You have a lot of spaces on the kernels, right? Some of the kernels are missing and all of that. And then with increased temperature, you also have increased pest and disease outbreak. In the last 2 years or 3 years, we've been battling fall armyworm across sub-Saharan Africa. We've also been battling Tutsa absoluta for the tomato farmers. And for those in the livestock industry, we have also battling so many diseases due to the increased temperature, which is very conducive for microorganisms that causes these diseases to survive. And then you're having increased evapotranspiration. So that means you need to, if you're not an observant farmer, you need to irrigate your field very often, right? And so which many farmers don't even have the resources to irrigate their field. And so this leads to stunted growth, abortion, elongated fluorescence, low productivity in general. And then for the livestock industry, there's increased water stress, there's lower milk production, and increased mortality rates, right? So of course, on the extreme of the increased temperature is drought. And I'm aware that, the droughts in Eastern Africa is really devastating, especially in Kenya and the Ethiopia and other parts of Africa. So, of course, this is the extreme effect. And when there's drought, there's nothing we can do. You can't even plant, you lose livestock. Next slide, please. So on one hand, we have increasing temperature, and on the other hand, we also have the intense rainfall, which is leading to increased losses. And so I mentioned the floods of Uganda earlier on. So every rainfall leads to severe soil erosion and soil nutrient losses. So we know that when there's heavy rainfall, the topsoil is washed away, there's leaching, and so it makes it difficult to support plant life. I saw in the comments somebody talking about using synthetic pesticides and fertilizers, which damage the environment. Yes, so it's that reduces the biological the biodiversity of the soil, so making it difficult for it to support plant life. And so increased rainfall leads to erosion, and so of course the plants will not do well despite having rainfall. And then you have saturated soils also, which have a negative impact on the root ability to absorb nutrients. And so we pray for rain. We usually say, oh, we want it rain. But unfortunately, when it rains too much, the plants are not even able to absorb nutrients because of oversaturation of the soil. And then we have variability. With variability, there's loss of input. So imagine as a farmer, due to variability, unpredictable weather conditions, you apply your pesticides or fertilizers on your field, whether organic or inorganic. And just after you've done that, it begins to rain. What happens? It increases the cost of production for the farmers. And remember, many of these farmers are actually resource poor. And so if they lose the inputs they have applied the first time, they're not going to get the money, to be able to purchase another input again. And so that's part of what even adds to the decreased yields among farmers. And then in the livestock industry, as I said, when there's increased rainfall, higher humidity, it allows, pests and diseases to thrive. So we know intense rainfall causes losses, and on the extreme of intense rainfall, we have flooding, which of course leads to loss of crops and investment, just like the farmer in Taraba. Next slide. So we know when we defined the food system, we talked about production, processing, storage, and distribution. And so beyond the farm, climate change also impacts the food system. So I'll give example much later. For processing, we know that a lot of the farmers do open air drying, and so imagine they do their open air drying and it suddenly rains. Of course, there's going to be contamination of their grains by fumosine and aflatoxin. And if they were planning to supply those grains to pass them to processors, organizations that make cereals and all of that, it's going to be rejected. And so in the end, the farmer will have toiled for nothing. Right. And then also in the storage and the distribution, you have high humidity in the warehouses leads to the proliferation of contaminants. And then in terms of transportation, when there's flooding, there's shipping delays, when there's high rainfall, there's shipping delays. And when there's high temperature, food products that need to be stored at cool temperatures quickly heat up, and then they lose their quality even before they hit the market, right? And then at the consumption level, you have shorter shelf life due to high temperatures, and which leads to lower nutrient density of our food. So, and that's why these days you find that we need to really biofortify our food, because a lot of the foods that are being produced are actually we're losing the nutritional quality of the foods that we're producing, right? Let's go to the next slide. So I'm just going to quickly talk about what we do at Ignitia, because now we go into the solutions, to this climate change. How can we then adapt to the climate change? So starting with adaptation, At Ignitia, we help to adapt to extreme weather events. You ask why. So Ignitia is a tropical weather forecasting organization, which started in West Africa, right? For over 7 years. So we have over 7 years, for over 7 years, our researchers, scientists, were trying to understand the tropical weather climate and how we can accurately predict the weather, right? And so so I want to give an example of how our solution is helping organizations and farmers adapt to the changing climate, right? In 2020, we're approached by an organization, we approached an organization, and when we're speaking to them, they're in Kaduna, which is the northern part of Nigeria. The northern part of Nigeria is much drier. It's the Sahel region. And so it's prone to dry spells and erratic weather conditions. So in 2020, we spoke to an organization, and while we were speaking, the problem statement is, when their farmers harvest from the field, they usually sun dry their crops, right? But sometimes they get unexpected rains, which leads to loss because there will have been high contamination, and some of the seeds actually just go bad, right? And so they subscribe for our service, which is a weather forecasting service. We let them know whether it's going to rain or it's not going to rain. And we even do beyond that. What we do, we also tell the farmers whether it's a good day for them to carry out some of their farming activities. So is it a good day for them to apply their fertilizers? Is it a good day for them to spray their crops? Is it a good day for them to mow their fields based on the weather condition, right? And so back to this organization, in 2020, when we spoke to them, their input recovery rate, because they pre-finance these farmers with inputs, right? And their input recovery rate was 60%. But after we worked with them in 2021, their input recovery rate increased from 60% to 90%. And that's why, because sometime in November, so typically in Nigeria, the dry season, the rainy season ends sometime in sometime in October. It starts sometime May, June, and ends sometime in September, right? And this was November. So the farmers were drying their maize, and suddenly it started raining. The extension agent attached to the farmers started to panic, and he called them that, did you dry your grains? And they said, no, we didn't dry our grains because we received the message from Ignitia telling us that we're likely going to we should expect some rains today. And that saved the organization about 151 million Uganda shillings. Otherwise, they will have lost all of that money. So this is one solution to the problem of climate change. This is one way to adapt to climate change. Climate information is very important for farmers to be able to adapt to climate change. And the good thing is that we've moved to East Africa now. I think our first pilot is in Kenya. We are starting a pilot in Kenya this year, and we'd like to go into Uganda and other parts of East Africa this year. So what we do is that we send the messages directly to the farmers' phones in their local language, letting them know what the weather condition is. So let's move to that. Don't run out of time. So there are several use cases for weather information, and like I said, it helps them in making decisions about spraying their crops, planting their seeds, irrigating the crops, sun drying the crops, and so many other things you can use the weather information for. Right. But of course, we know that there are extreme, please, you can go on. We know that there are extreme cases whereby there needs to be government intervention. They need to be able to help build dams and drainages to prevent flooding, because some of the floodings that happen in sub-Saharan Africa can be preventable if there were right channels for the excessive rainfall to wash away into, right? And so, of course, while we as individuals, as agripreneurs, as as agripreneurs, as farmers, have some work to do. Of course, some of the work also lies in the hands of the government, because as agripreneurs, you cannot build dams, right? You can't build dams, you can't build drainages, right? Next slide, please. So there are other ways for you as agribusinesses, as agripreneurs, as friends of agriculture, can adapt your agribusiness to climate change. The first one is changes in farming practices, and someone in the comment section also mentioned that we need to start adapting agroforestry and regenerative farming, because that's one way to actually reduce our exposure to the changing climate. So imagine you have a farm field, and on the boundaries of the farm, you have trees that will serve as breakers for the incoming flood. So that's one way, and it's very cost effective, right? That's one way to adapt to the changing climate. Then also by intercropping with using the push and pull effect. I know some of you would even know this more than me. So by planting crops that repel some certain insects in between your maize field, that would also help, in installing, or should I say, stopping the effect of pests on your field due to the increasing temperature and climate change. Other ways you can do that on your field is also by planting cover crops. Cover crops does a lot, right? Cover crops will help you to, one, reduce the impact of erosion, but it also helps to fix nitrogen into your soil. And if you fix nitrogen into your soil, you're less dependent on synthetic fertilizers, right? Then you have outside your changes in farming practices, you need to also adopt digital climate smart agriculture, just like what Ignitia offers. You also have those that do soil moisture sensing. And I know that a lot of farmers are small scale farmers, but with technologies like organizations like Ignitia that break this into very meaningful texts for farmers, the old ambiguity, or should I say the old misunderstanding, can actually be removed if you have people on the team that can actually help break all of this information down to the farmer. Then for those in the logistics business, we need to start adopting cooling technologies. And if you can see here on the right-hand side, this is one that was produced in Nigeria. What they have is just they've installed a solar panel on what we call on a rickshaw, right? So they've installed a solar panel on the rickshaw, and what it does is that they use this to transport fish, beef, and everything that needs cooling from the farms to the marketplaces. Then you also have drying technologies, irrigation facilities. All of these are required to help the farmers to adapt to the changing climate. And we're starting to see solar powered irrigation technologies. Then of course, drone technology right now is still a bit expensive, but it's something that there's a farmer in Nigeria called the Flying Farmer, helps small scale farmers to use his own, so they pay a rental fee, right, to then use their drones in spraying their crops and doing all sorts on the field. But again, like I said, there's a lot of we can adapt by ensuring that we practice agroforestry and regenerative farming. Then also, there are now small microinsurance companies that support small scale farmers. So it doesn't have to be something expensive, and ensure that you insure your farm so that at least you can still make some claims when things go south completely. Right. Next slide, please. I think I'm running out of time. All right. So what are the mitigating actions against climate change? We have sustainable land management, and What do we mean by sustainable land management? It means like management practices that would help to conserve the soil, reduce erosion, enhance carbon sequestration. So, for instance, we have something called no-till, and I'm sure Uganda is very far ahead of West Africa in terms of regenerative agriculture, to be honest. So I don't want to beat on this too much. So conservation tillage, stop opening your fields, make sure that you try to practice no-till system, cover cropping, crop rotation. Those are some of the ways you can help mitigate the climate change. Because if we don't mitigate it, we're just going to be wasting our resources. On the one hand, we need to mitigate climate change while also adapting to the climate change. Then in terms of efficient water management, we know that agriculture is the highest user of water. We are the ones that make use of the groundwater, and we pollute groundwater a lot through leaching. When you apply, go to your field, you spray fertilizer or pesticides on your field, all of that washes away into the communal stream. I mean, that's a very poor way of using our water, our limited water resource. So you can have improved water management, such as drip irrigation, rainwater harvesting, an efficient irrigation system can reduce water use and minimize, water-related emissions. Then looking at improved nutrient management, I've said this before, applying fertilizers efficiently, using precision ag. So, we find, and a lot of farmers do this, they don't check the requirements or needs for their soils before they start to add nitrogen fertilizers, and which ends up destroying the field. So you need to conduct proper tests before you start to before you don't indiscriminately apply fertilizers and other pesticides on your field, right? Then we have livestock management. I wouldn't say this is really peculiar to Africa, because we really have large-scale farms in terms of livestock farms. But again, it's still important that I mentioned is that we know that livestock management, livestock farming is a significant contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, and implementing practices like improved feeding regimes, better waste management, and methane capture technologies can help us reduce the emissions of livestock farming. Agroforestry mentioned that efficient supply chain and food, and food waste reduction. So you can reduce post-harvest losses and food waste along the supply chain. This will help mitigate climate change. This includes improving storage and transportation system, promoting sustainable packaging, encouraging consumer awareness to minimize food waste. Agroecology and organic farming is also one way to mitigate against climate change. Next. So what are the opportunities for agripreneurs in terms of in climate smart agriculture? So one way to go about this is there's something we call carbon farming. I know some people will have heard about carbon farming. So what we do is you offset their carbon offsetting program. So for instance, if this farmer is practicing through some organizations, what they do is that if this farmer is practicing regenerative agriculture or is helping to sequester carbon back into the soil, they will get some payments. So this can also help the farmers to generate income. So farmers that adopt practices that sequester carbon, conserve biodiversity, or protect the watershed can also get some income through carbon farming and payment for their ecosystem services. And I know that a lot of organizations are doing that in Uganda. You have a climate resilient supply chain. So when we say climate resilient supply chain, we're talking about developing, includes those things like what I just showed you now, the ice vehicle, you have the storage, transportation, cold chain infrastructure, and they can also create opportunities and warehousing and distribution. So as agripreneurs, you can start to think about where you can play along in this value chain. So should you be helping small farmers? Should you provide small solar technologies for small scale farmers to be able to store their produce temporarily before it is shipped to the farm? Or are you going to be involved in the shipping process by providing small scale cooling technologies like this? Or what exactly are you going to do? So there are many opportunities for you along the value chain. And in terms of agroforestry and tree plants, so the world is even focusing right now on regenerative agriculture. So as agripreneurs, you can also look at how then you can get support funding from external organizations by ensuring that you practice agroforestry and you support people to plant trees on their farm. And we have organic farming certification, which also always drive premium for your product. So if you're an organic farmer, you always get a premium for your product, and you can always export some of your product. They have extension. So some of you can I know that there are so many extension startups, right? What they do is that they help they support farmers, and they also help to aggregate some of those products. So some examples off the top of my head would be Apex, Extension Africa. You can Google about these guys and see how their model, how they've been able to develop a very strong business case through some of their services. Next slide. So yeah, sorry, I've gone a bit beyond time. So while we're working to brace agribusinesses, we must also take mitigating actions to ensure a sustainable system. So I think I will stop here and entertain questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ayo. That was fantastic. I don't know if there's any questions, but in the meantime, just a couple of questions about the weather forecasting. And what's the time frame generally that you can forecast the weather reliably? For example, when farmers are wanting to know when to plant their crops, what's the time frame? And is this affordable for smallholder farmers? And young entrepreneurs, like a lot of them on this call, could they afford such a system?
Okay, all right. Thanks for those questions, and these are really good. So yeah, the time frame we have. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great. So we have for the time frame on our system, we have we have staggered, or shall I say, yes, we have staggered ways of providing the information to the farmer. First one is that they receive every day on their telephone, they receive a 48-hour, so 2 days forecast on their telephone, telling them what the weather will be today and tomorrow, right? That's for the farmers. Then the second one is that they receive information about what the 4 weeks outlook is going to look like. So in the next 4 weeks, what's the general outlook? Are you going to expect more rains than usual this in the next 4 weeks, or you're going to expect less rain? Is it going to be drier? Is it going to be hotter in the next 4 weeks? And then we have the 6 months that also just lets you know, okay, in the next 6 months it's going to be drier. And then we also do something called nowcasting. We also have nowcasting to let you know, well, I'll call it, and also flood alerts, right? So we let organizations know about whether it's going to, they should expect in a particular region or not. So in terms of timeframes, those are the ways we stagger the information that is provided to the farmers. If we work with agripreneurs who are even tech savvy, they can see all information on our web-based platform. So they can see the information for they can see the information for temperature, wind speed, about 21 parameters on the web platform. Then in terms of you asked if smallholder farmers can afford this. Yes, I mean, in Nigeria, in West Africa, a lot of farmers are paying for this by themselves through partnership with mobile network operators. So what they just do is to enter a USSD code and then they're subscribed to the service. It takes it out of their mobile credits. So yes, it is very affordable for smallholder farmers.
Okay, great, thank you. We have a question on the chat. In which countries does Ignition offer its services, and do clients need a smartphone, or is a more basic phone possible?
Okay, so currently we're based in West Africa, but we have now entered East Africa. We have a current contract in Kenya. So yes, we are now entering the East African markets. Then also we are in Latin America, so Brazil and other places in Latin America. No, the farmers do not need a smartphone. That's why I said we're sending them the 48-hour forecast and the climate smart advisories in their local language on their basic phone. The farmers do not need a smartphone. However, if you're an extension agent, we always advise, or an organization, we always advise they also subscribe to our web-based platform where they can be able to see more sophisticated data, right? So it's not just it's going to rain or it's not going to rain. They're able to see what its wind speed is, what the temperature is, and all that on the web-based platform. So,
yeah. Okay. Fantastic. And we're going to provide the link there for your handbook on climate information for farming communities. So that's a very comprehensive guide that you can all download and use that as a real information source. I see, Mary, you have your hand raised. Do you want to ask your question live? Mary Arinda?
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
And thank you, Oladipo, for that informative presentation. Mine is not a question per se, it is just an addition. I've noticed, as in from your presentation, what you have said, I think we also have the same platform here in Kenya. For example, we have the Kenya Agricultural Research and Livestock Institute, KALRO, that has developed almost the same platform where farmers can get information on the temperature, rainfall for the next maybe 3 to 6 months. And they also advise on the type of crops to plant, given the weather outlook. They also advise on the type of livestock to keep. Again, you can even get information on the soil, the different soils from your different areas. And that also helps farmers to choose on the type of crops and livestock to keep. So I was just adding on what Oladipo has presented. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mary. And I think we need to move on now, but thank you so much, Aya. That was really informative and we much appreciate it. Thank you. Great. So I'm going to hand over to John now, who's going to introduce our next speaker, Martin Tenua. So over to you, John.
Thank you, Anna. And thank you, Ayobami, for the keynote speech. Yeah, no climate change.
John, you're cutting up on us, so maybe I'll take over and just introduce Martin, as we're a bit short of time. So we're absolutely delighted to have Martin with us. He started his own company, the Ento Organic Farm, which produces feeds and fertilizers from black soldier flies and wheelworms. It also has a strong training component for students, farming communities, and enterprises. He secured a 5-year memorandum of understanding with Makerere University, providing him land at Kabanola, just outside Kampala, for the enterprise. And in return, he provides space and materials for the training and research of students on entomology, organic fertilizers, animal feeds, and nutrition. So we're delighted to have you, Martin, and we look forward to explaining more about your farm and how you started it up and what you're doing. Over to you, Martin.
Yes, thank you, Anne, for the great opportunity you have given me to speak to this wonderful audience today. I'll just go straight to the topic of discussion. Yeah, so ladies and gentlemen, we all know that poultry, pig, fish are the fastest growing sectors in the sub-Saharan Africa. This means that these sectors can greatly contribute to poverty alleviation and also to food and nutrition security. However, you can see these sectors are potentially or are limited by the high costs of feed today, especially the protein sources, which account for about 70% of the total production cost. But why is these protein cost sources are so much expensive? Is because the land and water resources are reducing or they are becoming scarce. This is due to the high growing population, but also the effects of climate change. Let me tell you that if we can use the alternative protein sources like soy or cotton seed cake, the land where we would have grown these alternatives is occupied by settlement, but also it is affected by the effects of climate change. So the other thing, we are seeing high costs of fertilizers for growing crops, and most of for smallholder farmers. So there is still hope. Insects can save this situation. We know that insects are rich in protein, and especially they can be used in production of animal feeds. So we decided to use the black soldier fly biotechnology to turn what is the problem of organic waste, into feed that is between 38 to 62% crude protein, and that is on dry matter basis. But also in this waste, we can produce fertilizer and black soldier fly oil. That is what you see as the BSF oil. So our approach is simple. We collect waste from markets. This waste actually is generated everywhere. In restaurants, food waste. On markets, there is food waste. In abattoirs, there is food waste. On our farms, there is waste. So we collect that waste, introduce to the black soldier fly as feed. In the end, we can come up with 3 valuable products, as you can see. The feed, which is high in protein. When we can also extract oil, as you can see from this, from black soldier fly larvae. This also has good fatty acids. And also the residue after these larvae consume the waste can be used as a high nutrient organic fertilizer, good for the plant health. So if you look at this diagram, our concept, the BSF circular economy, there is solutions to food, to the challenges of in the food system. There are always solutions, but these solutions are offered by us thinking in a circular way. The way we produce food, the way we consume food, and the way we waste food. So by this circular process, you see, eliminates wastage. And for example, our model at 8 Organic Farm, as I mentioned, this is a bunch of waste. Most of the waste, for example, in my city, Kampala, ends up in the landfill. For example, Kitez, tons and tons of waste. This waste, if we leave all this waste to go in the landfill, we are going to have challenges. The effects of this waste, for example, the bad odor, the carbon footprints, the greenhouse emissions, the methane, those are really very dangerous to the food chain. So we collect this waste, as you can see, feed it to black soldier fly larvae. In less than 10 days, we get valuable products. These products, you can see, from this larvae, we can extract BSF crude oil, which is can be a feed additive, but also this oil can go into the cosmetic, pharmaceutical industries. So the insects themselves, you can see that we can make animal feed out of it that is low cost for chicken, for pigs, and for fish. And the leftover residue, which is a biofertilizer, you can already see that it can support farmers grow their crops. And then this food, again, will be taken to manufacturing or food processing factories. And the end, we shall find it in food markets. But along the value chain, you can already see that there are losses. So if we get back this food into our system, we are eliminating wastage. We are creating sustainable products out of it that can contribute to the sustainability of the agriculture, but also positively impact the environment. So this is the real impact by doing a circular business. For example, no poverty. People can access these inputs that are produced locally, that are affordable, and they can be able to grow food. And if everyone is able to grow food, there is no hunger. And this type of work, you can see that even women, even the disabled people can do this kind of work. This waste, if we divert it from the landfill, you can see how the water we can avoid water pollution. On the number 8 of decent employment, we have also launched an outgrower project or scheme as we grow, so that this outgrower scheme empowers the youth and women to have mini black soldier fly production units, and they can produce feed by themselves and also the fertilizer. Industries, you have seen the oil, which is going into a new industry of cosmetic, of pharmaceutical. We are achieving sustainable, responsible consumption because we are utilizing the resources, the land, the water, and also the energy, because this process is efficient. So the effects also, climate change, that is obvious. The carbon footprints, we are able to reduce them by diverting this waste from ending up in the landfill. But also you can see the life below water, the aquatic life is also preserved because this waste will not end up into those streams. And lastly, sustainable cities and communities, because we are removing waste. We are using waste as a resource. In the end, we are going to achieve clean environment that is good for the community. So at our farm, I'm glad also to let you know that we do rear even other insects at the farm. For example, you can see the grasshopper. The grasshoppers, we have started raising them. And this, for example, in Uganda, the grasshoppers are a good delicacy. So they can they are nutritious. We have also on the farm mealworms, and these mealworms, we can create chocolate bars. They can create also milkshakes. They're really good for human consumption. You can see on the third are the crickets that we have on the farm, and these crickets can be eaten as whole, or we can create cricket powder and make cricket porridges. So, and the insect industry, I think, as young entrepreneurs or as people in the audience who are supporting this, should be able to support such innovation, such circular economy, because hello.
Martin, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. These, for example, the insects, you need, first of all, small space. You need small space. You need less water. You need less feed. Why don't we utilize these industries? Because in nature, insects used to feed the animals. So we should be able to utilize them. So our impression, you can see here, we receive waste from different markets from our Kampala city. Actually, we just take a fraction of it. In the future, we plan to expand and increase the fraction we are diverting on a daily basis, about 3 tons of organic waste per day. And I always have different visitors from across actually the globe, and they see the work that we do. Here you can see one of the staff is spraying these black soldier flies, giving them water. And you can see here, I was handling some larvae. You can see it's juicy for the chicken. So this photo is that the last training I conducted of the youth to use waste using the insect biotechnology to produce, to survive, to create employment, to create sustainable products for our earth, for ourselves, for our farmers, and the entire country. So I'm glad to let you know with our team that we are operating a profitable business, but we are happy it contributes to the environment, but also it is creating the social impact. So with this presentation, thank you for listening to me. I welcome the questions that you have.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin. It's fascinating to hear what you're doing. We've got quite a few questions. I don't know whether Vincent Lutmana, whether you would like to unmute and ask your questions. You have questions about the protein content and also about possible contaminations. So Vincent, do you want to unmute and ask your question live?
So Vincent is not unmuting. The question, Martin, is one, there are pesticides that are used in Uganda. So don't those pesticides end up with these black soldier fly larvae, and they would affect the animals that eat those? And then the protein content of 38 to 62%, that there's a huge difference there. What causes the huge variation? That's Vincent's question. Could you take that one first?
I should, I think, take on those ones for now. For example, when you're growing insects, as for us people who are operating this as a business, the insects, the black soldier fly larvae, also requires a nutritional profile. So we have developed also diets that we give to these insects, and in the end, we are able to receive a high higher protein content, but it's because farmers do not balance their feed. And in the end, the insects are what they feed. That is generalized. That's why we see a big gap between the protein content. Some farmers can use less proteinous wastes, and we might see the larvae is of low protein content. But also, when you extract oil from the dry larvae, you increase the protein content up to 62%. When the oil is not extracted, the protein is actually a bit less. So on the issue of pesticides, the black
Martin?
soldier fly actually has the ability within to reduce heavy metals within through their guts. So that's really a big why we chose actually black soldier fly. So yeah, I think for now.
Martin, is it correct that they also have antimicrobial properties? So, you know, microbe contaminants can also be reduced. Is that correct?
Yes, the beauty, like now we have started seeing that insect protein is now in a separate category of nutrition. It's not only protein, but even those antimicrobial, boosting the immunity of the animals, all those advantages are like insane. That's why we now call it is in the separate category of nutrition. It's not just protein alone.
Okay, so Isaac has 2 questions.
But
Thank
the
you
advantages.
for that.
Welcome.
Thank you. I see that Charles has his hand raised. Would you like to unmute Charles and ask your question?
Hello. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good
My question is that after you have corrected this waste materials, waste product from the markets, maybe what is the process you go through from when you have corrected up to when you produce this larvae? What is the process in between?
So, yeah, thank you. We always waste is just a raw material, and you have to first of all to breed the life cycle. To rear any insect, you have to first of all understand its life cycle. If you understand its life cycle, you know what may be on the black soldier fly, what the eggs requires, what are the favorable conditions. You know that they don't eat. You know they require this temperature. You go to the larvae. It's the only stage that feeds. You know all those and what kind of feed. You know it has the pupa stage, which is the dormant, and becomes flies again. And if you know any cycle of insects and you know what every stage requires, you're good to do your own production. But I might not go into the breakdown of everything, but we can keep in touch. And we have actually a web training platform that I can share the link, because now we have started sharing knowledge in a digital way so that people see this beautiful creature that provides all these opportunities at once.
Okay, Isaac, thank you very much. Isaac, you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Martin, for your presentation and perhaps a demonstration of the circular economy with the black soldier fly. But my worry with your technology, and I'm both a scientist, but a Christian as well. And if you go to Numbers 11, you'd absolutely know that there are some insects that you can eat, or even maybe products that you can eat. There are some that perhaps you may not eat. And so that hence my question about what do you use the oil for, because my worry was perhaps, you end up using this for, for human consumption, deep frying, chips and stuff like that. And I've got my serious reservations there, even though in the Bible there may not be any explanation as to why you should not eat creepy crawlies, for instance. But genuinely, if you then do the science, you know that it harmonizes. Because I then saw that later on you talked about this mealworm again, which then you explicitly said that this one you can eat for human beings. Would you not rather just limit this to perhaps animals that you may choose that they, rather than put it into the food value chain for human beings?
Thank you. Thank you for the good question, Isaac. About consumption, soon or later, insects are going to be on your plates, be it oil. Yeah. But for now, on the black soldier fly, apparently the focus is to produce these products for animal feed. For example, you mentioned about the oil. The oil can be a feed additive in the animal feed diets, but also this oil can go into the cosmetic industry to make lotions, to make Vaselines, because of the anti-aging even properties that are into. So people, we are looking at it can come on the plate, but also it has also other bigger values it can contribute. Yeah. For the black soldier flies, I've seen it on people's plates being mixed in the salad. So it is also human food, though it's not popular now than the grasshoppers, which are seasonal, the crickets and mealworm. They are the most popular for human consumption, but also the black soldier fly is also on the tables, though not popular.
Okay, so sorry for this. If I can just, maybe we can have a discussion later on this between you and me. So perhaps let's have can we have your number and your email address so that we can really have a further discussion?
I can send that to you, Isaac. Thank you very much. One last question, Simon Peter, please.
Hello. Yes,
Hello,
thanks
Simon.
for the I'm good. Thanks for the presentation. My aim it's like, how can we convince the community? For example, the black soldier. I try to innovate that system in our farm, my uncle's farm in Fort Potro. But people, when they heard that our fish are being fed by the black soldiers, there is a way how it was looking like it's disgusting, and the farm people started talking a lot of words. They feed the lovers. How can we eat such words? So my major it's just to enlighten more how we can convince the community, the villagers, that no, this is really food for the fish. That's my point of view, just to enlighten more about it, because I try to convince people, are like, no, it's not healthy. I don't know, for the community. Yeah, that's my point, just to fight that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Simon, for that. I totally agree with you because this rearing insects seems new. So there is a lot to do with changing people's mindset. We have a mindset challenge that however much we do this, but people regard insects as dirty, for example. So there is still need to change people's mindset through the training to show them the beauty, the purpose, the benefits of using insects. For example, in the villages, they know that chicken can run off after, can scavenge insects wherever it can find. If you see the fish in the lakes can feed on insects, you can see the pigs, the way they keep on looking for insects in the soil. So they just need to be to have more training to change their mindset. It is one of the challenges that in this industry. But the people who have used the products of insects, I would say they always come back, and that's why we are progressing and we are expanding and we are training more youth. So there is a lot to do on mindset change.
Okay, thank you so much, Martin. That was fantastic. I'm going to just share my screen here because there is a very interesting video that Simon prepared with a TV crew, and you'll have the link to that video. It's definitely worth watching, and you'll also have the link in the deck to the handbook that IO contributed to, which we mentioned had a lot of very, very useful information. So I'm going to hand over to John now for the concluding remarks.
Thank you very much, Anne. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, where you're coming from. We thank you so much for being with us from the start of this webinar to the end. We are now concluding our webinar today. We thank Ayobami for giving us the keynote speech. We thank you, Martin, for presenting the circular economy. So the key picks from today's webinar are really that, one, climate change is multifaceted. The effects are really multifaceted. There are many, and they need a multi-sectoral approach, but also a multidisciplinary approach. So as Ignatia, Ayobami, they are giving farmers information on how, when to plant, what to plant, etc. Martin at Ento Organic Farm is using the circular economy to ensure that what comes out of agriculture doesn't end up in the water that we drink, etc. So that circularity, that allows us to reuse, reduce, and recycle the elements or components, products of the food chain is really important. The webinar series is still ongoing. We are going to have the next webinar on next Thursday, 18th May, and it will be on carbon trade and decarbonization of food production. So if you want to learn how you can make money out of carbon, what's a carbon credit? How do you create carbon credits? How does money from carbon trade reach farmers? Join us next Thursday. I once again thank you so much for participating in today's webinar. I look forward to seeing you again next Thursday. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. And we do have a couple of outstanding questions, one from Joyce about the role of government. We'll cover that in the next webinar for sure. Thank you. Have a great day. See you next week. Bye.